And here he is, Jeff Paterson from RinkWide Vancouver, and our Canucks reporter. How are you?
I'm doing all right, guys. Good win for the Canucks on the weekend. I don't know how deep we want to get into a victory over the lowly San Jose Sharks, but let me just say this, and I think it's all clear after 10 games that the Canucks still haven't played anywhere close to their best. But you do have to give this group credit for finding ways late in games, and we saw this from the playoffs on. We saw it last week against Carolina when they were down in the third period, and that had to be deflating to get the 2-1 goal and Jake DeBrusk scoring and then to give it up a moment later. But, they stick with it. And that much you can say about this Vancouver Canucks team. They stick with it and they find ways to grind out results for the most part. So credit to them, even if it is against a team like the San Jose Sharks.
It's a roller coaster to this point, and it does not feel like they played well. And yet, they win their 2 games that they've got on the Kings and the Knights. If they win those 2 games in hand, they are the first place team in the Pacific Division, and they very well might win their next 2 games.
And the underlines are pretty good in terms of expected goals for and expected goals against.
It's a weird one.
Well, and it takes me back to 2 Mondays ago, coming off the win in Philadelphia, when we talked about where would they be without all this depth scoring and Kevin Lankinen. And 2 weeks have gone along, and really the storylines haven't changed. Kevin Lankinen has picked up points in every game that he's played and was forced to make some saves when that game was on the line the other night. And the depth scoring. Now it's Pius Suter, of all people, stepping into the spotlight, becoming Pius Suter has 3 of the last 4 Canuck goals, by the way, going back to that Carolina game last week. So whether it's Pius Suter, whether it's Kiefer Sherwood, Teddy Bluger's had his moment, Danton Heinen had the 2-goal game in Chicago. Those guys have all found ways to contribute. The names that we haven't mentioned, still waiting for all of those guys to really kind of kick it into high gear.
All right, let's get to the Canucks at the 10-game mark. Jeff, care to offer a letter grade and tell me who your best player, team MVP is after 10?
I'd give them a B, I think. It is hard to argue with the results. As Blake said, 2 outright losses in 10 games. They're on a 106 or 7-point pace through all of this. So if this is the scuffling 10 games, then look out. If they get Dakota Joshua back, and if they are ever to get Thatcher Demko back, there is ways, certainly, that this team can and should get better. There are warts. They've been exposed. We've seen those. So I don't want to go overboard with my letter grade, but I think B recognizes the fact that they picked up 13 of 20 points in the standings, but also gives them that space and that runway to continue to get better individually and collectively. Certainly the power play again on Saturday. It had its moments. I thought they zipped the puck around, but I don't want to talk about them zipping the puck around. I want to talk about them putting the puck in the net, and it's been a while since they've done that with the man advantage. So I would say a solid B. Individually, when we get to MVPs, I think you have to look at Lankinen. For all of the angst at training camp and the fact that they saw what we saw in Penticton and felt the need to get that deal across the finish line and convince Kevin Lankinen that this was the place that he had to be, where would they be without him? I don't even want to contemplate that. So as good as Quinn Hughes has been territorially and as terrific as Connor Garland has been really since day one in Penticton. And it's funny because I asked on Twitter yesterday, just a kind of lazy Sunday Twitter poll, who's been the 10-game MVP. I put Brock Besser in there, and how quickly they forget about their favorite son on Twitter. This is a guy that got 5 goals in 10 games, 40 goals last year, a terrific playoff run. There were questions about his health after missing Game 7 against the Oilers, and Brock is off to a really nice start, and I think he got 1% of the vote on the Twitter poll. So some recency bias here again, because Lankinen has been terrific, and I think I would throw my vote for Kevin Lankinen. You're nothing in this league if you don't have goaltending. We see that with the teams that don't have it. And the Vancouver Canucks, maybe not the way it was designed at the outset of the season, but they have stumbled into goaltending, and he has been that good for them.
Garland was tremendous again on the weekend. He is the heart and motor of this team, it feels like. And he is playing. He's saddled with the $12 million guy, if that makes any sense. And yet Suter was very good as well. Is Suter a fix on that line, or is Dakota Joshua going to be the fix on that line when he comes back in a game or two? And if they liked the look of that line with Suter, that's fine, except they become a center short. And Ratu had a fabulous weekend down on the farm. They could make that change, and they're down in California as well. Abbotsford is, so I suppose they could immediately make that change if they wanted to. But how do you see the Paterson line shaping up here versus the Ducks and the Kings?
Certainly in the here and now, Suter looks like a pretty damn solid option for that line. Certainly more than Arshdeep Bains, who had one shift in the third period and sat the final 18 minutes, and looks like he has now been replaced. So you're right. It causes some issues and exposes some weaknesses elsewhere. If you take your fourth line center and move him to the wing, they just don't have the center ice depth. So it would probably facilitate recalling Ratu, unless they wanted in a pinch to use a guy like Danton Heinen or somebody to, but Heinen's been really good on that third line. So I don't know that you want to mess with that. But that's kind of the conundrum that Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff will find themselves in. We saw it last year. Suter, as versatile as they come, I mean, that is really his superpower, is his ability to not just play, but complement guys higher in the lineup, play wherever they ask him, as low maintenance as they come. And then, as we saw late in the clincher against Nashville and the other night against San Jose, does some of his best work in the final minute of hockey games, apparently. Who knew? But came through in the clutch for them there. And all of a sudden, he's up to 4 goals already and missed the season opener because he wasn't fully healthy. So 4 goals in 9 games from Suter. You will certainly take that. So I would expect that Suter will be on the wing with Paterson and Garland in Anaheim. I'm not anticipating Dakota Joshua is going to play that game. Rick Tocchet keeps talking about needing some of these like final touches in practice, the real battle drills, the practices that I've seen from Joshua. He's been involved, but doesn't feel like he's really been truly battle tested. So I'm not sure that he's ready to go Tuesday. Would buy him a little bit more time there. And then I guess like this becomes the question, guys, doesn't it? Like, as good as Joshua and Garland were together last year, Connor Garland has clearly graduated from a third line position on this team and probably any team in the National Hockey League the way that he's playing. Dakota Joshua, to me, still feels perfectly slotted as a third-line guy. I don't know, especially coming off this situation, which is different than the hand injury and getting back in the lineup. I think Rick Tocchett's talked about the fact that they probably will monitor his minutes, ease him in a little bit, and so I think this idea of just plunking him down on a line with Paterson and Garland, probably a touch premature at this stage.
Help me out. If Suter's going to play that wing, who's your fourth center?
Well, that's just it.
Yeah, so it's got to be a Ratu recall, or you just play with 3 centers and you double shift somebody.
Oh, he said, Heiden, there's a couple guys that have twirled at center before. So
well, and that's why the Oman move was a little bit interesting to me, Jeff. I saw you fired a poll on that as well, on whether or not you thought he would clear. Big break that they were able to get him down to Abbotsford.
I thought, given the health situation of a bunch of teams, the Islanders have run into an absolute rash of injuries. Colorado's been up against it all year long, and thought Colorado, the team that drafted him on a few years ago, maybe would repatriate him. I thought he would get claimed. I thought it might be one of those cases where a team takes him on a short term and then maybe puts him back on waivers at some point. I just thought with this climate, he's a ready-made NHLer, even with the flaws that have kept him out of the Canucks lineup. I thought he was going to get plucked, but maybe that second year on a one-way deal scares some teams off because even if they bury that contract, they're still on the hook for the money payout. And I think a lot of teams and a lot of organizations figure they've got their own Nils Amon down in the minors somewhere.
That's all fair, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it timed out nicely that both teams in Southern California, so he was able to play for Abbotsford last night. What a collapse by the baby Canucks, though, up 4-1 with 10 minutes to go, and they lost 6-4. So not a great night overall for the farm team, but Nils Amon did get in some game action. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, people here in this market have cried about asset management for years. It was a roll of the dice, no question. And sometimes when organizations start to improve, guys like Oman are collateral damage, right? That they just get passed on the depth chart by others, and that is a roll of the dice that you have to take. And I think that's sort of where the Canucks were. They could have easily sent Arshdeep Bains down because he doesn't require waivers, but Arshdeep Bains started in the top 6 the other night. And it's obvious just by usage that Rick Tocchet sees more right now in Bains than he does in Nils Oman. So Oman, he clears, he stays in the organization, and I guess on some level, it's a good bounce and a good break for the Vancouver Canucks.
And of course, we know that he can go up and down now for 30 days. Nils Oman can with impunity, correct? So
and they do have an open space right now. They're rolling with 22 on the roster. Most people would say, "Oh, well, it's just waiting for them to activate Dakota Joshua," but they do have an open roster spot. If they wanted to fill it for tomorrow night, they could then send Oman back down and activate Joshua for Thursday. So lots of moving parts here. But yes, as it stands right now, they're accruing cap space because they're running with just 22 on the NHL roster.
Mm-hmm. Dreger tells us it's a matter of when, not if, they recall Jonathan Lekkerimäki. Have you allowed your mind to dance there and see what it would be like to add a young goal-scoring winger to this Canucks mix, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm going to slow the roll just a little bit, and it's great that he is scoring at the American Hockey League level. That's what he's expected to do. Most of his production has been on the power play, and I saw Cody Sievertson, who covers Abbotsford for Canucks Army, saying 5-on-5, it hasn't been all lollipops and rainbows for Lekkerimäki as he learns the North American game here. And so, look, the Canucks power play could absolutely use a bump too, but I do think that they want him to round out his game, become a complete player in all areas. And at some point, I do think they'll take a look at him. And I also think they've got a massive decision to make on Brock Besser. And I do think that there is a through line here from one to perhaps his heir apparent that if Lekkerimäki does everything that they hope in Abbotsford and then gets an opportunity and can be a goal scorer in the National Hockey League, maybe that gives the organization pause for thought. It probably gives them some leverage at the very least. Lekkerimäki's not ready to replace Brock Besser, and I'm not trying to run Brock out of town, but there is a massive decision looming on Brock Besser, whether it's before the trade deadline, whether it's at the end of the season. So I do think that they would like to know what do they have in this kid, and can he score at not only the AHL level, but the NHL level. I think in the here and now, he's probably best served to stay in the minors and just continue to cook down there and be the best version of himself and force the issue. But a month into the season, not even a month into the season, probably a touch premature to think that it's just a matter of time before it happens.
Hey, the fact that he's just doing what you want him to do at this stage of his progression is really good in and of itself. Sure. He's 20 years of age, and it's just nice to see him hitting all the milestones, if you will, because, he was a pretty lightweight guy who had slumped a little bit around draft time, and he's back on track, Jeff, and that's a success story because this team, of course, does not have a whole lot of blue chips to play right now.
Well, and I saw some video out of San Diego, the one-timer on full display off his off wing on the power play, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what a power play goal looks like. It's been a while since I've seen one at any level. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. Check off the boxes. Just keep doing that. Find some consistency. Make sure that this wasn't just a one-off weekend against a San Diego team that, by all accounts, isn't among the best in the American Hockey League, but that's who the opponent was this weekend. So, no, a good weekend for Lekkerimäki. Not a great weekend overall for the Abbey Canucks, but some steps forward here, and he's just got to keep on keeping on and eventually get to a point that if he is undeniable in his goal scoring at the American Hockey League level and the rest of the game has come along too, he'll get his opportunity.
If Lankinen wasn't playing like Lankinen was, our next matter would have been, the lead story of them all. But Dreger tells us he expects Demko to practice with his teammates this week. And we were talking Friday about how that's the next sign of progress. That's sort of what we need to see here before we can talk return, which drags us saying maybe about 3 weeks from now. So just your reaction to Thatcher Demko on the comeback trail here and practicing with his teammates this week.
Yeah, I've just decided personally not to buy into anybody's timelines, and that's all due respect to Darren, who, I mean, obviously beyond reproach when it comes to his reporting over the years and his contacts. But what if he comes back to practice and is gone for another month, right? Like, that's where we are with Thatcher Demko. Like, yes, I want to see him at practice, but this idea that, he's practicing this week, 3 weeks, I can't get there. We've seen this too much from him. Where he has come back and then disappeared again due to injury. So it's been an ordeal. We all know that. And guys, this is where we are. And our buddy PJ wrote about it, and Patrick sat in with me on RinkWide on Saturday night. But did you see Max Miller from the Hockey News in San Jose on Saturday with like the grainy 200-foot video? Yeah. Yes, and as Patrick said, it's like following a Sasquatch right now. It's like we're getting these glimpses of Bigfoot. We're not sure what we're seeing exactly. Yes, it kind of looks like Thatcher Demko, but we're not convinced entirely. I will say that from the 7 seconds of footage or whatever it was after morning skate, he was taking shots from Dakota Joshua, and that was the first documented evidence of him facing shots from anybody but the coaching staff. So while Dakota's not playing yet, he is an NHLer. And so on that level, at the very least, like, that seems like a little bit of progress there. But it was hard to really get a true sense of, how dialed in Demko was, how aggressive he was able to be. And the other thing, too, is you can face shots all day. For him, and especially with this injury, it's all the game simulation. It's the blue paint. It's the traffic. It's the uncontrolled stuff. It's the up and down. And we haven't seen any evidence of that yet. So I still think that there's some room. Now, if he's making steady progress, then sure, 3 weeks probably would be in the ballpark. But I'm just I'm going to be a believe it when I see it kind of guy. And, maybe it's a good play on the organization's part to get him back into practice out on the road where there isn't a whole lot of media, because we saw the crush in Penticton when he spoke, the one and only time that we've had access to him. So, just kind of let him ease his way in. But as you guys know, when a player is fully involved in a practice, he is to be available to the media. And we would like to hear from Thatcher in his own words again about where he is as we approach almost 2 months, since it's certainly been 6 weeks since he spoke to Penticton.
I'm right there with you.
I'm thinking a one-on-one with Olivia here a little later.
Yeah, they might do that.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, though. And this is not a knock on Thatcher Demko, but it hasn't been a linear healing process anyway. So unless he's playing a National Hockey League game, I'm going to have to be in the wait and see mode as well. I'm not going to cheer on necessarily the practice part, because it's not a linear healing process. He could very well be gone for another month.
You guys say that, but after he returns to practice and does the media, there'll be a morning skate somewhere down the road where we're all very excited, wondering, is this the day that Thatcher Demko returns? I mean, let's face it. He's a Vezina finalist, so let's not underplay.
But when he plays one game, I need to see him play a second game at this stage.
Totally.
Game, he came back for one game of the playoffs. How did that go?
Yeah, right? No, I know.
It's not
but I mean, that's 6 months ago. I mean, I would like to think that the lesson is learned. I would like to think that everything Thatcher Demko told us in that one media session points towards him coming back when he's absolutely ready to come back.
That's
and
not the issue.
I know you can't simulate games, guys, but he has rushed back in the past, and I think that was part and parcel of why we're sitting here still talking about when Thatcher's going to play.
I don't think it's anybody's fault, Matt. I don't think it's not going to be that he's quote unquote back too early or anything like that. I think they're going to do all the right checks and balances to get him back in the lineup. But this injury is of the sort where he could play 1 or 3 games and then go, it's back.
Right, but there's a lot of injuries like that, guys. Well, and none of us are experts on this injury. So
nobody is. That's the problem.
Everybody's talking about, wait till Thatcher Demko gets back. There's 2 issues here. It's can he get healthy and can he stay healthy? And at this point, he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt on staying healthy anymore until we see him perform for a long stretch.
But you guys were saying, you say everybody's, when's he going to come back? That's my point, is actually, no, with the way that Lankinen is playing, he's got time here. They can find a way to bring him back. Like, if he has to serve as co-starter to Lankinen, or even primary backup to Lankinen if he's still on a heater, like, these are both good news scenarios for the Vancouver Canucks, that they have other chambers to go to here in goal if need be.
And sure, to be clear, like, you can't get on a lengthy run without the first appearance. I understand that. So yes, as he works to getting back in the lineup, that is all really good news. But I'm just taking this approach now that if I see him out there, great. But for me to think that he's back and back for good, I need to see how this knee stands up to the test of National Hockey League game action.
The week ahead, Jeff, Anaheim, LA, and Edmonton. What you think?
Well, speaking of goaltenders, have you seen what Lucas Bachel has done for the Anaheim Ducks?
Yeah.
He's got the best save percentage of any goaltender in the National Hockey League that started 4 games this season. He's running with a .937. They're the lowest scoring team in the NHL. Like, they do nothing in the way of supporting the goaltender, but this guy has been all world for them in the absence of John Gibson. Like, I think he's past John Gibson now and is probably the best goaltender that the Anaheim Ducks have. So I would assume that they see him. He played yesterday. They lost to Chicago. That's another very gettable game, though, for the Vancouver Canucks. The Ducks are the lowest scoring team, as I said. They have one guy, I think Troy Terry's got 9 points, and then nobody else has more than 6. Like, they really struggle to generate. It would be nice to see the Canucks jump on them. The Canucks have given up the first goal in 4 straight now, including the other night in San Jose, and that was part of their secret sauce last year. They opened the scoring in 53 of their 82 games, so they had a whole bunch of 1-0 leads and built on those. They got to get back to doing some of that. It would be nice to see the power play spring to life. So, of the 2 games remaining here in Southern California, the Kings although they lost in a shootout to Chicago. And they're in Nashville, so they got to travel across the continent, come back to face the Canucks on Thursday. Well, the Canucks are home basing there in Southern California. Maybe a little bit of a break there. And, of course, the Kings without Drew Doughty, but finding a way at 6-3-3 through their first 12 games. So of those 2 games there, that one's going to be more difficult. And then did you see the news out of Edmonton this morning?
Mm-hmm.
Connor McDavid back on the ice. Now, he's not going to play tonight, but he didn't rule out the game here on Saturday. Like, I thought the Canucks had caught a break in the schedule with the injury. They said 2 to 3 weeks a week ago, and there's McDavid back on the ice. So I'm now thinking that, they'll be cautious, obviously, with their superstar, but it's Monday. By the time Saturday rolls around, I think we might see 97 at Rogers Arena. So Canucks will have to deal with that. Obviously, Leon Draisaitl's found a way in the last couple of days to pick things up in the absence of McDavid. It's the Oilers, so we know the backstory there. So that'll be fun on Saturday at the very least, and we'll see what happens. But, starting into the second 10-game segment of the season for the Vancouver Canucks, hard to argue at 5-2-3, but certainly plenty of areas to clean up as they get rolling here again on Tuesday against the Ducks.
Mm-hmm. Marvelous stuff. We will watch the week with interest and, of course, look forward to that Oilers game when you join us on Friday, J-Pat. Thank you for this. Until then.
All right, guys. Thanks.